Well, it's been a while since I looked at a Zelda game here on this channel, and what a better way to return to the series with a retrospective on one of the most controversial Zelda games of all time, Zelda 2, of course, The Adventure of Link. Zelda 2, this is a game where we had the original Zelda, which was a top-down 2D adventure game with RPG, action, adventure elements. And then we had Zelda 2, a 2D game which completely flipped the perspective, changed a lot of things about what we thought we knew about Zelda. But a lot of people in retrospect like to hate on this game. A lot of people love to shit on this game, to say horrible things about this game, to besmirch its good name. But I am here to defend Zelda 2 in my retrospective here. Guys, I am a massive fan of Zelda 2. I love this game. I've beat it numerous times. I've enjoyed every single playthrough that I've had of this magnificent game. And I would venture to say that I enjoy this game more than the original Zelda. I think that the game does a better job at being a Zelda game than the original Zelda. And why am I saying that? Well, because I think every aspect of it truly is better. Now, were there certain things that the first Zelda game that brings to the table that the second game doesn't have? Well, yes, but let's talk about it a little bit more in depth. So, a lot of people say they don't like the 2D style of the game. I think that it helps with the perspective. I think it looks nicer. It's interesting to actually see Link from this perspective. I think there's something about this perspective where it works, and a lot of people like to pretend that it doesn't work because they say, oh, well, this game just tried to look like Super Mario Brothers. They tried to bring in the Super Mario Brother fans because, of course, you know, Mario always had a bigger fan base than Zelda. Now, Zelda has a massive fan base, but Super Mario Brothers was one of the best-selling games of all time, so it was kind of hard for Zelda to kind of live up to that potential. And in a lot of ways that it did, but I think what they tried to do, in a way, I think some people are right, they tried to kind of capitalize off of that popularity of Super Mario Bros. And try to have the best of both worlds. I don't have a problem with this. A lot of people like to say that they don't think that it works, and I have to ask, well, why doesn't it work? Why does the top-down perspective work so much than this? There's nothing inherently wrong about it. Now, you could say it's a preference, and I believe that's what it is, it's a preference. But here I am to say that I like that way of doing things in the first Zelda games, and I like this way of doing things. And I think the animosity has really kind of deterred Nintendo from ever making a Zelda game in this perspective again, and I think that's a real shame. So, before we move on to the gameplay and talk about all the differences and the similarities, let's talk about this absolutely batshit insane story that you just would not expect from a Zelda game. Now, we've had a lot of really crazy things happen. We've had magical masks possessing Skull Kids. We've had all these different types of apocalyptic settings. But have we ever had this storyline, even anything come close to this? Ganon is dead. He's fucking dead. How's that for continuity? That guy is 6 feet under. He is gone. You gotta like that, you know? That not even Mario had the balls to do that. Like, the main villain, he's gone. He's dead. He is buried. And his minions are working to try to help resurrect him. And how are they going to resurrect them, pray tell? Well, by killing Link, by fucking killing him and harvesting his blood so they could actually bring the King of Evil back from the dead. I think that this is really quite the gory illustration. You never actually get to see this happen. But, you know, if you do game over in this game, you get this classic game over screen where Ganon just goes, that classic laugh. I love that game over screen, but, man, I mean, really, this is the type of motivator that I think a game needs. If you lose, well, you actually get to see on the game over screen what actually happens. And, well, I mean, I guess Link is just bleeding out somewhere off to the side out of frame. You know, he's probably up on some table, and, you know, I don't know what they did to drain the blood from his body, but that's something that I really don't want to talk about anymore. And anyway, the main goal is that Link awakens Zelda, but this is not the Zelda from the first game, it's a different Zelda. And it's the same Link. And this is where the Legend of Zelda chronology just completely obliterates itself in only the second game. Like, it's a different Zelda, but she has the same name, and it's the same Link as far as we know, I think anyway, and a wizard has put her under this spell, and like a complete goofball, he ends up killing himself with his own magic. And Impa, who you might remember this name from Ocarina of Time, well, it's a different Impa, but it's still Zelda's servant. She gives you a box containing 6 crystals, which you must bring to the 6 palaces littered throughout Hyrule. Bring them here, and then you can access the Great Palace, where you can find the Triforce of Courage, which you can use to awaken Zelda from her slumber. So the first thing that you'll notice besides the perspective in this game is how the overworld looks, and it works a lot differently. So you'll be going around, and this is the one thing I will say, I don't really like the way how the overworld looks because Link is super tiny. It kind of reminds me of Earthbound. Remember when you get transplanted to that prehistoric land and you're like really small? It just, you know, it doesn't look good. It's, you know, it's interesting, but like you would rather just have a normal size Link on your screen. And everything kind of doesn't look that great, like from this style, you know, but you won't be spending too much time on the overworld. You're like here maybe for like mostly a minute, and then you'll duck into a cave or into some grass or into some woods, and you'll see Link, and you get a good perspective of Link using his sword. And you'll notice another thing. You'll see a number pop up on the screen when you kill an enemy. That's experience points. Oh wow, we're really getting into RPG territory here. Now, as you power up, you'll have to meet that certain magic number, and when you do, you'll get a choice whether you want to level up your life, your attack, or your magic. And this is kind of fun deciding on what you need first. I always like to go for health more because, let me tell you something, it's really easy to die in this game. This is a difficult game. It is definitely harder than the first game in a lot of ways. The only thing really that's very challenging in the first Zelda game is the Wizrobes. Those bastards are the hardest, and I even talked about that in my retrospective on the first game. If it wasn't for the Wizrobes, that game really wouldn't be that hard, really. It truly isn't. You know, when you think about it, the last boss isn't really that hard. It's a doable game, you know, if you put aside the Wizrobes, but they're there, and that's kind of what upsets things, and makes me tear my hair out most of the time when returning to that classic initial game. So you'll go around, you'll collect experience points, and you will also come across spells as you go into different towns, and I really like the designs of these towns, and this is the game that introduced towns. You didn't have towns in the first game. And think about all the classic towns that we would be visiting in future games. Think about Majora's Mask, Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess. This game paved the way for towns, and I know were many other games to come about that would have towns, and you'll find some unusual things in some of these towns. There's even the old town of Kasuto, which has these invisible enemies, and the town is completely deserted. And unless you have the cross item in your inventory, you'll just start getting hit out of nowhere. You're like, oh shit, what's hitting me? And it's these invisible enemies. And I thought that was pretty unique. I like this abandoned town, even though there's really nothing here of any significance. I think it has a really cool aesthetic, a really ominous feel to it. I really like this addition to the game. And then you have this town here where you've got some of the villagers, they're actually enemies. You talk to them and they turn into bats. I'm like, whoa. I mean, I thought that was unique. We've never seen that in any other Zelda game. But I really like the look of these towns, and you get to go inside the houses, you get to do some favors for some of the townspeople, and these are mostly so you could obtain the spells from old sages that happen to be in the basements of these houses. And it is kind of weird how all these sages are just kind of all the way tucked away in the basement. They're not really doing much. They're just kind of hanging around. But, you do get some really useful spells that will help you out on your journey. And these spells really reduce the need for items. Instead of carrying potions around with you, you have a life spell. There are potions in the game, but instead of refilling your life, these potions actually refill your magic instead. You have a shield spell, which really protects you from enemies. You get to jump for the first time in a Zelda game, and you really don't get to see this. Like, there's actually a jump button for the first time in a Zelda game, and the only time in a Zelda game. This spell just lets you jump even higher, but, usually in Zelda games, after this, jumping was just automatic. You come to the edge of a platform in Ocarina of Time, and you'll automatically jump off of it. You had the Rock's Feather as an item in Link's Awakening, but you never saw it ever again. This is the first time that we actually have a dedicated jump button. Like, this is a Super Mario Brothers game, adding to the sentiment that this game was heavily inspired by Super Mario Brothers with the 2D side-scrolling perspective. There's a few other spells that are not really all that impressive. I never really used the fire spell. The reflect spell is not really that handy. It will only come in handy in certain situations where you'll really need it. And you also get to turn into a fairy, which can be useful at times as well. So there's a lot of interesting spells. Some are better than others, but it's really cool. It's a cool concept, and I don't know why a lot of people seem to overlook this. Zelda too bad. I don't like it. Just like, come on, guys. Let's be honest. This game brought so much to the table. When we only had like a little template to work with, you had some items. And that's the thing. Okay, Link might not have some of the tools that he had in the other games. Like, I could live without the ladder, for example. Now, you don't have the magic rod, for instance. You don't have the bow and arrow, which, you could say, like, that, that's one thing that's very iconic that this game doesn't have. So, you have a bit of give and take. Can we say that? Yeah, I think there's a little bit of give and take. That's fair to say. But it's not horrible. You definitely have some viable options that you could say, well, this game gives you a pretty decent inventory. It's just a greater emphasis on magic, because you didn't really have any magic. You didn't even have a magic meter in the first game. And to tell you the truth, it was really annoying that the bow and arrow, every time you used an arrow, it would deduct from your rubies. I always thought that was just plain stupid. So you don't really have to worry about that here. But one thing, the magic meter can be a giant pain in the ass. You have to sometimes really strategize. You have to know the area. Sometimes if you use too much magic, like to heal yourself, you might not be able to do the jump. And sometimes the jump is required in certain areas of the game. And oh shit, I used up all my magic. I don't have enough. I better start grinding so I can find some magic power-ups. That could be a pain in the ass sometimes. And to tell you the truth, during my playthroughs and my most recent playthrough, that's what kind of slowed me down. You sometimes have to grind to get more magic. And so, yeah, that is a downside without a doubt. And God forbid if you die in this game. There may be a save feature, but guess what? Remember when I mentioned the experience points? It is imperative that you level up any chance you get in this game. And God forbid if you die, you will lose all your experience points. Now, this is not really too bad the first couple of levels, but as you get further into the game and the enemies get tougher and you do gain more experience, well, it can be a real pain in the ass, because you could just be mere points away from achieving your goal of getting to the next level. Oh shit, you die, and then everything is completely fucked, and then you have to start all the way from the beginning of the game if you lose all your lives. You'll get some lives, there's chances to get extra lives, but they're rare. You have to snag one of these little Link figurines, and if you manage to do that, you get an extra life. Well, congratulations. But if you're at a real tough part, or if you keep losing to a boss or anything like that, because this game is a real marathon. If you die in one of the palaces, and there's 7 in total, now if you die at the last palace, then you get to start from the beginning. But that is the last level in the game, the last dungeon in the game. So that's the thing, instead of calling them dungeons, they're palaces. And these palaces are filled with tricks and traps, and I love the layouts of these palaces. They're filled with so much personality. And all the hazards and the enemies, there's so much uniqueness to them. And yeah, sometimes things could get a little bit annoying, but the exploration is so fun, and you really feel like you get lost here. You don't really get that, except for the last dungeon in the original Zelda. You didn't really get lost. You kind of knew where you were going. Everything felt very, based on a grid, just going from room to room. And that's classic Zelda. I'm not knocking it, but this just felt big. It felt grand. It really felt like you were going into a palace, like you were a true adventurer, explorer, going in there and saying, well, what's down here? And there's elevators, which, I didn't know elevators really existed during this time, because you kind of associate Zelda with medieval times. At least I do anyway. That's what the vibe I get from it, even though we don't really have a time period like that. It doesn't really exist in our world, this universe. But there's elevators. Go figure. Take the elevator. Going down 16th floor, lingerie. Like, I mean, I don't know, whatever, but it's really fun just traveling around. These palaces have numerous floors, and you never know what you're going to get yourself into. And if there's one enemy that's going to give you a problem in this game, it is the returning Dark Nuts. Now, remember I mentioned this in my first retrospective. The Dark Nuts and the Wizrobes, they were a nightmare to contend with. But you would get a whole room full of these Dark Nuts in the first Zelda game, and it would just be almost impossible to beat these guys at times. You just felt completely powerless, underpowered. And the Dark Nuts are no better in this game. Their patterns are completely erratic. You have a whole different perspective on fighting them. You're supposed to duck their shots and, kind of backstep it a little bit. And it just never works out, and I always end up losing to these guys countless times. They are a nightmare in every sense of the word in this game as well. And these bosses, they just feel better than the original game. You kind of had some generic enemies. You have your dragon, you have your spider, but here, you really get some cool looking bosses, and you get like a huge giant dragon in this game. You get some really beefy bosses that are not that easy to take down. I mean, some of these guys will give you a run for your money, and you really feel satisfied after you beat them, and I like that. This game really does make you really work for it. You really feel like you have to try in this game. You can't really coast by. You have to use all your skills, all your spells that are at your disposal, and it makes you feel like a true warrior. So, to me, this game just always immerses me more. Like, I love the original Zelda. But the point really of me making this retrospective is to really drive the point home that this game is good, and it feels good to play it. It's got good gameplay, and it's really enjoyable. And one of the biggest aspects of Zelda is the exploration, the journey, and this game has the journey. It certainly does. I would say that the biggest setback is the fact that when you lose, you go back to the beginning of the game. That's certainly not fun. But really, there's a lot of people that said like, oh, Death Mountain, oh my god, it's so hard. Oh, it's really not that bad. It's hard. It definitely is. But if you prepare yourself and you level up a little bit and you don't go charging in there, you will do just fine. Trust me, it's not as bad as everybody says. Now, what is as bad as everybody says is getting to the Great Palace. Oh my dear fucking god. This is a real tussle, and every single time that I replay this game, this is undoubtedly the hardest part of the game, without a doubt. I mean, just, oh my god. You've got to go through so much, and as you go through the overall map, you'll keep getting pulled into these encounters, and there's no random encounters in this game. Once in a while, you'll see enemies will run across the screen, and you'll start fighting them. But you could always pretty much avoid them if you're skillful enough, as you can clearly see here, but sometimes you won't be able to, and that's just fine, because these are usually over and done with. This is not like Final Fantasy. You're not going to have to attempt to run or anything like that and then fail and have to see a series of moves play out. No, you can just simply kind of walk off the screen a lot of times. Sometimes you'll have to walk a few extra steps, but it's never really that bad ever. But here you have to complete it because you're like ducking into little caves, there's lava, the enemies are going to try to push you into the lava, you're going to want to try to defeat all the enemies on the screen, and you still have to progress your way towards the Great Palace. It's a pain in the fucking ass, and there's some of the toughest enemies in the game here, some of the most annoying enemies in the game here. It is a real tussle to say the least, and the Great Palace is no picnic either. Full of tough enemies that want you dead, and you have not only one tough boss, but also two tough bosses if you don't know the trick. So you'll fight against the Thunderbird, which this guy is a real bastard, and you have to strategically use your magic here. That you do have to use thunder to start things off to even damage this boss. And this is a really weird boss that they use this as the first final boss. Because, like, what is the Thunderbird? Who is the Thunderbird? What is the Thunderbird? What is this thing here? I don't know. It looks really cool. It looks awesome. But just too easy. We don't know anything about the enemy we're fighting here. Anyway, this guy hits hard. You're also going to want to use shield so you could lessen the blows, and you better believe that you better be leveled up to the max here, because not only do you have to contend with the Thunderbird and the other boss that we're going to talk about in a moment, but you also have to make it through all those tough enemies I talked about. This is a huge, massive palace. It is just huge in every sense of the word. There's dead ends. You have to find the best route to get to the Thunderbird in the first place, and then you've got to survive, and that's really the biggest part of the challenge. Is you have to survive all the way getting to this battle and get in there with magic. Now there's ways of doing this, but you have to find the best way of going about this, and that is the challenge in itself. It also doesn't help when you've got random ass shit like this happening, where you have this giant bot just just dropping out of the ceiling. I'll never forget when I saw this for the first time. It scared the ever living shit out of me. Now, like, how are you going to be walking by and knowing it's there unless you're using a guide? You're going to take damage. And by the way, these bots, they look almost identical to the slimes in Dragon Quest. And since Dragon Quest came out first, I'm gonna have to assume that there's a little bit of inspiration there. And one of the worst enemies that you could come across in here, and you're going to come across it, is these bird warriors with these swords. They jump all over the place, and you got these rooms with these blocks, and you're like basically running for your life because you don't want to stop and fight these guards. Trust me, there's just no way that you want to do that because you're gonna end up dead real fast. Yeah, you might be forced into it. The thing is, most enemies stop chasing you in this game, but this enemy, this specific one, will keep on chasing you until you leave the room. So I'm gonna let you guys in on one of my favorite tactics in order to level up and making this game easier. And it's pretty much kind of intended that you be at level 8 in all the categories of magic, life, and attack. So when you're at New Kasuto Town, go into battle with the enemies over here. And, you know, you're going to fight off against a lot of these lizards. Fight them all. Keep on entering into battle. You know, use the life spell when you run out of magic. Go back into New Kasuto Town. See the old woman that can recover your magic. And keep going at it. Keep going back into battle. Keep fighting the lizards. And you will eventually level up. See, the reason why you would do this is because it protects you. Because, as I mentioned before, when you die, you lose experience points, and you have a safe harbor here, the town. So use this to your advantage. It's one of my favorite tactics. So now that I've disclosed my secrets, let's get back to talking about this boss battle here. And if you come into this battle and you don't have enough magic, guess what? And you can't cast the thunder spell, guess what? You're not beating the Thunderbird. Now that is fucking cheap. I will tell you something there, that is a flaw, because if you come into this battle, because you're going through a tough ass dungeon here, guys. And if you come to the end here and you don't have enough magic, you're like, oh, what? And you're dead. I mean, oh my god, that is just not something that I want to be a part of. And that actually happened to me. In this game, I totally just lost track of my magic, and I'm la 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 la, and I walk into the boss fight with the Thunderbird, even though I've fought him numerous times before, and I know that I have to cast that spell, and I know that I have to have a certain amount of magic, but here I am, without a care in the world, just walking into a battle without enough magic, and I'm dead. I'm fucking dead. I'm helpless. I can't do anything. And not only did I feel foolish, but I died. And that wasn't good, and that wasn't fun. And this is really kind of like a beginner's trap. That's a classic tactic used by a lot of developers. And, well, you know, it'll definitely teach you to really pay attention next time, I suppose. Now, as you defeat the Thunderbird, you'll come upon Dark Link, and this guy is hard, unless you just do what I do every single time, since I learned the trick many years ago, even before playing the game, and you simply crouch in the lower left-hand corner of the screen and stab constantly with your sword, and you'll eventually defeat Link like he's a joke. And I've seen people try to fight Link fair and square, and I have to say, fuck that. You're telling me you want me to fight the Thunderbird, which is hard as ass, and then you want me to go and fight Dark Link? Hell no. I'm not doing that. I'm never doing that at any point in my life. Get the hell out of here. So, yeah, you beat Link, and hey, you know, Zelda wakes up, and peace is restored to Hyrule, and it is all over. And in closing, I have to say, this game is tremendous. At the end, you really feel like you had a tumultuous journey. You really feel like, man, me and Link really went through a lot there. We fought a lot of tough enemies. We had a true adventure here. And that is why I absolutely love this game. Every single time I play this game, it is a true experience, and that is why I love it. So if you've never played this game because a few haters on the internet made some nasty reviews about it, well, I have to say, stop listening to these people. There are so many people, and I've talked about it, especially in my Sonic retrospectives. Many people are trying to look at at certain older games from different perspectives and why these different perspectives are definitely appreciated and they're fun to listen to. A lot of times they're just real SMHs. You just like want to really just shake your head at them and be like, what the hell, man? Like, these are great classic games, and how are you gonna come on YouTube and just besmirch their good names? I mean, come on. Zelda 2 is a classic. It is a classic in every sense of the word, and I absolutely love what it brings to the table, and it is one of the best Zelda games of all time. So guys, what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. Do you like Zelda 2? Do you hate Zelda 2? Do you think it's better than the first, or do you think the first is still better than the sequel? And thank you all for watching, guys. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bell to get all the notifications when I post all my new videos. I want to thank all my patrons for your continued support. And thanks again, guys. I'll see you next time.